Welcome to the Cheer Athlete. This week, we're going to talk about two topics that I saw on one of the cheer mom groups. One, should you brace to prevent an injury? And two, how do you teach your child body positions and what it feels like to tighten a muscle? There were some great answers in the group, but as a physical therapist, I'm going to give you some different ideas about these. So listen all the way to the end so you hear both tips and both parts of this episode. Welcome to the Cheer Athlete Podcast, where we bring coaches, parents, and athletes expert tips and advice to help keep cheerleaders healthy, strong, and at the top of their game. Now let's go. If you don't know me, I'm Laura Turner. I'm a physical therapist. I'm a strength coach, and I help cheerleaders reduce injuries so that they can stay on the mat for cheer. I was a cheerleader all through college, and I coached for about 13 years post-college. Then I went back to school, and I got my doctorate in physical therapy, and I did my dissertation in preventing cheerleading injuries. And can the movement screen help to predict cheerleading injuries, and can that help to prevent them? And the evidence shows that yes, looking at how you move can actually help you prevent an injury. So that is my first tip as far as and my first point of view, like with both of these topics, whether you should wear a brace to prevent an injury and how do you train your kids to feel what they're moving and know their body positions and improve so that they can tighten and relax and know what it feels like to feel that way. How do they move? That's your first line of defense. How do they move? Now, the answer on the bracing to prevent an injury, I don't think you should do that. Most research will show that bracing actually weakens a muscle. It gives you support, yes, when you have an injury. So if you had an ACL injury, bracing is very important in those first stages, but the goal is always to get out of them. Now, we use the brace so that we don't have that side-to-side motion. And the braces that they use post-surgery are really clunky. The braces that you might use in practice are going to be neoprene. They're not going to be as clunky. They're going to be softer. They may have metal hinges on them. And you have to check with the rules, back wrist braces with metal hinge in them, they didn't used to let you use. They probably let you use the hinge now as far as a knee brace goes. But what happens is it actually inhibits your muscles. It stops you from getting a good solid contraction. It doesn't allow that little bit of side to side, but nothing is guaranteed. And it doesn't necessarily let you hyperextend. Again, nothing is guaranteed. What's more important is to prevent an ACL injury. And this goes for wrist stuff too. Like if it's your wrist, make sure you have the mobility and the strength. Make sure your shoulders are strong enough to hold you up. Make sure you have enough wrist mobility, but enough wrist and shoulders strength to actually take the pressure off the wrist. For an ACL, it's very different. The mechanisms are very different. The wrists, they go through a lot of mobility. They're more likely to be a strain. For an ACL injury, it usually will happen either coming out of a jump, coming down out of a stunt, landing wrong. It could happen for a base as they're coming down trying to control and they just kind of lock out and then twist and bend and tweaks. And so those are usually in a cheer world, it's not something that is necessarily preventable with a brace because those injuries are going to happen because they're random and occurring. Like you land wrong and you don't, it's not a contact position. Now, what can help to prevent that is strength training. And knowing, first of all, how do you move? The movement screen goes through 7 different components. For the lower body, standing on one leg and moving your leg up and over a string that's about kneecap height, maybe a little lower. Can you lunge with your feet in line with each other? And can you go down to touch your knee and come back up without losing balance? And then looking at a squat pattern, do your knees cave in? Can you do the squat pattern at least to hip distance? Ideally, a full squat is getting your butt to the ground, ass to grass. That doesn't mean you do that loaded. It means that's full mobility with control, with your trunk upright and good core control. So those are the basic lower body movement screens. And then we look at a straight leg raise. And they all of them require core strength, they require ankle mobility, they require hip strength and mobility. And if we're missing some of that, then the risk of injury is higher. So using the brace isn't going to change that. Knowing how you move, working on correcting, getting better movement, building up as much strength as you can will help. Now, I say this from a place of love because I had an ACL injury post college, but I was skiing and I didn't know what I was doing, and I stopped uh, and face planted with my skis out behind me, like, and they didn't release. So I got this weird torque on my knee. So different mechanism, but no contact again. My leg just went in a weird position. There was nothing I could do about it, and I tore my ACL. I know it's a devastating injury. I was out of work for, well, I was out of work for 4 weeks before surgery. I was out of work for 8 weeks after surgery. I didn't have any short-term disability. So, you know, I was living off my parents at that time. And it took a long time to get back. I was lucky enough to work in a physical therapy clinic. So I was going, when I went back to work, I was able to do my therapy and get back into work. But the biggest takeaway I had, it's been now, I tore my ACL in 1993, I believe. Uh, Maybe 92. I tore it in 92 and I had surgery in 93. So it's been that long. And one of the biggest risks of a repeat injury is a prior injury. Especially females are known to re-tear or have a second tear in their opposite leg when they've had an ACL. And that's because it can be some body structure that we can't change, but generally it's because we're not strong enough. So we don't have that hip strength. So we really need to get in the gym. We need to build hip and knee strength. We need to get that coordination of movement and learning, where our body's supposed to be and train our body in that plane. And the more strong our hamstrings, our quads, our glutes, our abductors, and our inner thighs are, better. For me, my workouts consist of step ups, lunges, squats, and deadlifts, and a variation of single leg, double leg. And that has kept my legs strong for almost 30 years now. Yes, there's some ups and downs, but I haven't had a risk of a repeat injury. I skied for a very long time after that injury. I was able to actually get back and stunt with kids that were coming in to do clinics with us. Not as well as them. They were really good stunters. But that had nothing to do with my knee. So you can get back fully into cheer afterwards. To prevent it and prevent those catastrophic injuries that like take you out for the rest of the season, get strong, learn how to move, make sure that you don't have that when you come down, you learn how to control a jump landing. If you're coming out of a handspring, that you're learning how to control your landings and building strength into that so that you don't have that hyperextension moment and that hyperextension with rotation moment. So that is the key to preventing an injury. There's no guarantee. There are weird accidents that happen. You trip on the mat, your partner doesn't know where they're going and they bump into you and you just kind of stumble and hit. You step off a curb wrong. It can happen. That's life. But to be the best you can be and prevent those injuries, do not rely on a brace. It's not going to do the job. You have to get yourself strong and you have to do the work and you have to build that strength up around. And in doing that, if you do have an injury, it will make the post-op recovery better, easier. It's still a year process, but getting your range of motion back, getting your strength back, and actually getting into functional strength training happens sooner when you have good, solid strength beforehand. So that's my recommendation on bracing, especially for ACL injuries. Like, don't do it. It's only going to make your leg weaker. It does not help prevent an injury. If you have a overuse injury and you got patellofemoral syndrome or, it's more just like a tendonitis, bracing on a temporary basis can help. But again, the goal is to get out of that so you're not in that. So uh, please get into a strength program if you're not already. If you are interested in learning about one, you want to learn more about how to prevent an injury, reach out, Laura at Move Better LLC, or just leave me a comment in the show notes, and I will reply to them myself, and we can talk a little bit about what that looks like and figure out how to get you or your cheerleaders strong. So that leads to the next question about body position and body awareness. And um, I actually had other people ask me for clinics, to talk about body position and control. And there's a lot of cheer techniques that absolutely are key and crucial. And I'm not the person to teach you those. They go hand in hand with looking at biomechanics and general movement and the physical therapy aspect of it. But they're they're going to be a little more specific on like where to hold your leg, and some of that's changed since I've coached. So I defer to people like Coach Lamb, and all of your coaches out there for the body awareness there. What I can talk to you like, so one of the questions was, how do you tighten your quad, and how do you teach how to tighten the quad? And really, they have to feel it. When somebody comes to me on a after, so let's say an ACL surgery, because it's very easy to lose that feeling of getting the quad control, and that's one of the first things we try to get back. And most times when they come in, I say, okay, tighten your thigh. They're like, I am, and like you see nothing move. When we're looking for something to move, it's the kneecap sitting in the socket with the leg out straight. The kneecap moves up. So you tighten your thigh, the kneecap has to move up towards your head. And you should see wrinkling around your knee, and kind of like you'll see if you've got muscle definition, you'll see your quads separate into different fibers. Um, but quite often they can't quite feel that and get that sensation there. It usually, if that's a range of motion factor, you put a pillow underneath the knee, something like a rolled up towel, and just tuck that underneath the knee. And then tell them to squish the towel without lifting their foot off the floor. So give them an external cue that they are, squishing the towel instead of moving the kneecap and tightening your thigh. It's just squish the towel. I'll often put my hand, right underneath their kneecap and have them squish my hand. And then I can lower my hand down so that they squish my hand in a bigger range of motion, all the while keeping that heel in contact with the ground or the floor or the table, whatever surface they're on. That starts to train them to know, okay, when you're squishing my hand, and then they take a look at it and they see, oh yeah, I see my kneecap moving. And oh yeah, I see those wrinkles happening. That gets them kind of training their body, visualizing what's happening, as well as getting the body awareness and the sensation around that to do that. You can do the same thing with squeezing your glutes. There was a great comment on the page about, holding a penny between your cheeks. That can be hard to do because how often are your kids holding pennies between their cheeks? But it gives you an idea. Tell them to stop, tell them to squeeze like they're trying to stop from passing gas as they're going up. That's one way. That kind of gets the pelvic floor involved. The other key piece there was squeezing your glutes and learning how, if your hip flexors are tight and it can inhibit what's happening at the glutes. So trying to actually lie down and squeeze your bottom at that point and kind of like lift your bottom up off the floor without arching your back. That's one way. I like pelvic tilts. Now, pelvic tilt is going to extend the hip by flexing the lower back. So that puts the hip flexors on stretch, and it kind of gives a little cue to the glutes. Now, the key thing as you're pelvic tilting is not squeezing your glutes to get to that. It's just allowing that pelvis to move and kind of getting the sensation of that hip extension that they need when they're up in the air. Then from there, take them down go over onto all fours and do some cat cows. So they get the sensation of tucking your bottom under, Then you're going to come up on two knees, and you're going to stick your booty out like you're going to sit back on your heels, and then come up tall and tuck your booty under. As you're tugging, like you're moving your belly button up towards your nose. Again, the external cues work better. So if you think as you're coming up, tuck on the booty under would be like you're getting punched in the gut and you're rounding a little bit, but not super, not using an ab motion, but just kind of tucking a little bit. Like a zipper they're taking the zipper from their right below their belt up into their neck, and that will help to kind of pull everything in. Moving your hips towards the wall away from you. So as you're on your knees, you move the hips towards the wall away from you. The reason that we work from lying down to quadruped position up into kneeling is it changes the angle on the hips. And when you get into standing, it's harder because your hips there's more involved. You have your whole lower leg that has to get involved. When you're on the lower positions, it helps them to get the sensation there. And then move it to kneeling, move it to half kneeling, which is one leg is up and one leg is down, working on that balance and tucking the bottom under and then sticking the bottom out. So sit back, touch your butt to the wall behind you, and then get as tall as you can without letting your back, and keeping that zipper engaged. So zip up and then unzip, stick your butt back, zip up, come up tall. That will rock back and forth. As you come up tall, you're going to get the glute squeeze. You're going to stretch out the front of the hip, and you'll get that coordination. Then you can bring that into standing. And the same thing, you can do a hip hinge, that you're sticking your butt back and coming up tall and zipping up. Deadlifts are a great way to get the glutes engaged and get that sensation. So bending forward to touch your toe, stand on two legs, and I have a video on YouTube that is a toe touch progression that will, stand with your toes on a roll and you touch the ground and then you alternate where your feet are. I found that from FMS, the functional movement systems. And so as you do this toe touch progression, you're getting some nice flexibility in the back of the legs, but the roll actually pushes your hips back to go into flexion. So then when you come stand up and you reach the ceiling and you stand up tall, you get your hips into extension, which is what we want with the glutes. And getting that sensation, getting that full extension is what it will feel like to get that control. So training that mobility pattern and learning how to hinge at the hips to go from a bent position to an extended position can help to get that coordination, get that feeling of squeezing the glutes. I think that's a hard one. I think the kneecap is really easy, but once they start to get aware of that, then you train it by doing single leg bridges or leaning over a bench and doing hip bridges that way. And Nordic hamstring exercises where you're kind of staying up tall, but you lean forward without letting your butt stick out. So keep your butt away from the wall, stay as tall as you can, and don't let yourself fall because you're keeping that zipper. There's some great videos out there for Nordic hamstrings if you look for those. I don't have any because those are hard for me to do. And I shared one on my Instagram page from Mike Boyle. So if you can find that because explains that really well. So the key thing with learning body control and learning where your body is in space, a lot of that, especially if they're young, if they're in that 8 to 12 range, they just don't have the body awareness. And giving them cues that, gets them into the environment, gets them feeling not so much the cue of move your kneecap or tighten your thigh, but make your, squish the towel and really get as tall as you can. Try to pull up and try to get the top of the ponytail here, touch the ceiling while standing as tall as you can. Try not to let your butt touch the wall behind you. Don't let yourself lean back. You have to play with it. The cues will vary per person. This goes along with motor control. And a lot of times, so when I see somebody in the clinic and they can't do this, it's because something is overworking for something else. So in the instance of the quads, it's very common for the hamstrings to overwork for the quads. So the back of the leg to overwork for the front of the leg. So doing some exercises to inhibit the hamstrings right before you kind of cue the quads, such as stretch your hamstrings before tightening your thigh, can help to kind of get the brain to recognize what's supposed to happen. Motor control happens in your brain. It's a feedback loop. It's how the brain perceives what is supposed to be happening with a motion that we're doing. It can be an isometric motion, like just tightening your thigh, or it could be lifting your leg up. And the brain has to, recognize, oh, when I lift my leg up, my quads have to do the work. My hip flexors, my quads, and my core has to do the work. While my opposite leg, hip has to be stable. And if something is a little wonky and those muscles aren't quite getting the signal from the brain, it may be because the hamstrings are saying, "Whoa, I don't want to lift that high, so I'm gonna stop that. You stop lifting. I'm gonna hold on and hold tight." Well, we got to train the hamstrings to chill out, and we got to tell the quads to step up, do their balance, and keep things balanced. And that you can test that by muscle testing, but the way that you can get around that is create movement instead of just a static stretch. You move in and out of a hamstring stretch. I've got a video on YouTube that you pull up with a strap and then you raise your opposite leg up and down. You can do the hip flexor, so you're on one knee, that you're moving your booty away from the wall behind you, and zipping up, and then leaning forward, sticking your booty out behind you, and going back and forth, rocking that way. So you get your hip flexor and your glute stability at the same time, and you balance them and you move in and out. And then train in 3 planes of motion so that you can work all the different ways. So side to side, forward and back, and rotation. And that starts to get the body recognizing, your joints start to recognize where you are in space. That gives you feedback into your brain, your motor control. And then that teaches when you get to the end point of stretch, it teaches the muscles, oh, hey, I got to relax. I got to contract. So you might try stretching the quad in a standing position, and kind of lunging forward with the knee pushed back to the wall behind you until you feel a nice pull in the front of that thigh. And then once you feel that pull, then you're going to switch it around and lean into that so you get a more load into it. And you're kind of going back and forth. As are gait exercises that I use frequently to stretch the front of the thigh as well as strengthen it by getting some eccentric load into it. And then you're not telling them, you need to tighten here and feel that, but you're starting to train their muscles so they know how to contract and how to relax, and they know which way to move. It's tricky. It's not something that happens in one day. So be patient with your kids. It's something they have to learn. And 8 to 12-year-olds don't want to sit and focus and be like, I'm going to stop and stretch and hold and zip up and then stick my booty to touch the wall behind me. Like, they're not going to get that. They need to play. And they need to do short bursts of it throughout the day. But when you can do that, that will help them start to learn their positioning and body control better. And you can take that all the way up the chain so that they learn, if they lift their necklace and the top of their uniform to the ceiling, or they pull it down, like, yeah, we want to be chest proud, but we also want that ribs to be down so that we keep that stacked position, ribs over hips. That helps the core be stable, which then helps the legs be stable too. 9 times out of 10, if somebody can't control what their quads are doing, it's because their core, their pelvis, and their rib cage aren't connecting yet. And they need to kind of get there first. So always start with some core conditioning and trying to create some mobility to get that conditioning, and then progress on. That was a lot. What I hope you take away from the motor control is that you gotta give them external cues. You've got to, tell them to zip up, tell them to push away, or to get tall. Those are different cues that they'll start to, they'll start to learn, and that will train their body how to do it. You need to strength train. You need to make sure that you have good motor control by doing mobility work that also leads to stability. So a stretch with a stability combined and moving, kind of flowing like a wave, back and forth to train their body. And over time, that will get there. It's work in progress, as with everything else. And the same with preventing a knee injury, making sure that you build that strength, you learn how to control things, you learn how to land, really learning how to land with soft knees and landing easy, like not getting the hard smacking impact. Um, and the more we reflexively try that and we learn how to do that over time, the better the body can respond to it when it's a flyer is coming down out of the air and coming and stepping and just lands just right. Or, you know, if you're in a tumble pass and the more you land your work of landings, the better your control is going to be and the less risk you're going to put your knees at. I hope that's helpful. If you have questions about that or you want, videos of any exercise, go ahead and reach out to me. I do have some new programs that I am starting to launch, and they are month-to-month strength programs. You buy it and um, and you can run with it and go with it, or you can, choose to work with me. Whatever your choice is. I'm going to be running a special package that you buy 2 months and you get more free, but I've got to work out the details of that. So stay tuned for that. If you're not on my email list, you want to be the first to know about these as they get released, because they're going to be limited, number of people that I can take into the program at one time. But if they'll be geared towards preventing injuries for flyers and for bases, and get some specific exercises for strength training, mobility, and overall motor control. So if you're interested in learning those, also helping you to improve your flexibility, reduce back pain, improve body awareness, these exercise programs are for you. So reach out if you're interested and send me an email or send me a direct message on Instagram. All those links are down below. I hope you have a wonderful week. Don't forget, when in doubt, breathe it out. Take life one step at a time. You can do anything you put your mind to, including learn that motor control. And you are responsible for your own vibes. Let's go get the day.